Okay, we also have two units in chapter 3, and it's really a little bit more divided, though it is moving together. Paul finally gets to something that he's been trying to get to. In fact, he started a prayer twice already, and now he finally gets it started and completed here in chapter 3. But verses 6, units 6 and 7 are to be seen in chapter 3. He starts off in unit 6 by talking about himself as a prisoner for the sake of the Gentiles. I think that's very significant in setting up what Paul is trying to do as he talks about his role with the Gentiles. God called him to be a minister to the Gentiles, and that makes Paul a minister or administrator of the mystery that he's about to talk about and about to really explain more fully. He'd already set it up in the latter part of chapter 2, where he has talked about the breaking down of the wall and the bringing near of those who were far away. All of this has been done, of course, in the gracious work of Christ. And so that's what Paul is talking about. So look at the content of the mystery, if you will, and very carefully, and deal with that, and wrestle with it in verse 6. Look at Paul's role in the mystery in verses 7 through 9. And then it is very important to look at the purpose of the mystery and the revelation of the mystery in verse 10. So look very closely at that, and then wrestle with all of this. Check the commentaries, see what they have to say, and then come up with an interpretation of this very significant passage as it talks about this great mystery that God has revealed as He works out His purpose. That's the other thing. Notice how it relates to the purpose of God. And then Unit 7, it begins in the middle of, I think it's verse 11, I believe it is where it starts. Verse 14. Unit 6 goes through verse 13. Unit 7 begins at verse 14 and goes through verse 21. This is Paul's prayer. As I say, he started this before twice and interrupts himself as he begins to talk about the gracious work of God in other ways. And then he comes back to this and he begins to lift up this prayer beginning in verse 14 and going through the end of the chapter. I think it's significant that Paul is seeing himself as the instrument that God is using, and now he is, as that instrument, he is offering this prayer for the people of God, specifically, I think, for the Gentiles, because that's who he's been talking about and working with here. But he sees this gracious work of God, and now he's going to express a prayer for the Gentiles that they may have something very specific, and that's what you want to look at. There are some concepts in this prayer that are very important. The first of these is the family concept, and that's in verse 15. What I'd like for you to do is really wrestle with this and see what you think verse 15 means. I think it's a very significant verse. And then, once you have done that, go and look at the commentaries and see what they say and come to a conclusion about what it means that every family on earth derives its name in this situation that he is from him as he is talking about that. So wrestle with that, if you will. And then also note the the request that Paul is asking for, that God would grant something. Of course, what it is power. But look at that. Notice the number of different words that Paul uses for power in this situation, and what they mean, and what Paul's trying to say here. Wrestle with that, if you will. But then in verses 17 through 19, notice the purpose of Paul's request. The reason that he's praying that God would grant this so that something would happen. So I want you to take a look at that and work through it and see if you can figure out what the purpose of this power is. It's very obvious in the verse, so I expect you can figure it out. But look at it and wrestle with that, and then look at and deal with the benediction in verses 20 through 21. Then when you do that, it'd be a good thing for you to just back off and look at this from the beginning of verse 1 of chapter 2, and look at these two chapters together as you see how he's building this up. From the fact that these Gentiles were dead and are now alive, they were far away and they've now been brought near. They had no access to God, and now they have access to God as he keeps on moving through that. So take a look at it and wrestle with it and come up with a good interpretation of it.